your camera off. Let me introduce myself. I'm Susan Martin. I'm the Program Director for PhD Career Development in the Graduate School and the University Career Center in the President's Promise. My GA, April Fuller, is on the call. She'll be monitoring the chat box and helping with technology if needed. The work that I do as part of the Graduate Pathways program, that framework is all about developing personally and professionally while you're in graduate school, because it's so much more than just earning the degree. This program is the Rita B. Leahy Career Series. It was started last year. Last year we did 4 sessions. This year we're doing 8. There's typically 1 per month. And we create a panel of 2 or 3 PhD alums who are all from different disciplines but working in a common career cluster. So today's panelists are all working in different federal agencies, and they're going to share their stories with you. I've put some contact information. If panelists, if you're comfortable with sharing either an email address or, Scott, I didn't have your LinkedIn profile. If you have a way that you'd like students who are interested in following up to do so, you can put that in the chat box, but it's not necessary, it's up to you. And I just want to tell you that the next Rita B. Leahy series is going to be about data science careers. And in November, we're talking about research careers outside of academia. So with all of this taken care of, I am going to ask each panelist to go ahead and introduce themselves. And why don't we go in the order of Scott, Ashley, and then Heather, okay? And they'll each take about 10 minutes. If you start, panelists, I know your stories are fantastic, and if you start to go beyond that, I'll just give you a little wave, or I'll also send you a little chat. I'll send you a private message in the chat. So with that said, I'm going to mute myself. If each of you would introduce yourselves, and then we'll let Scott start telling his story. Okay, so go ahead, Scott.
Okay, so I'm Scott Albrecht. I'm the team lead on the National Survey Operation, National Survey of Children's Health at the U.S. Census Bureau. And then, so we'll introduce everyone, and then I'll kind of do my 10-minute story. Okay.
Okay, I guess that means I go next. Hi, I'm Ashley Ruth. I am an alumni from the undergrad program in 2010, and then I graduated with my PhD in 2015. And now I work at the U.S. Army C5 ISR Center. I'll bother telling you what that acronym means when it's my turn.
So many acronyms in the government. My name's Heather Platter. I got my PhD in Behavioral and Community Health from the University of Maryland School of Public Health in spring 2019, so not too long ago. I'm a cancer prevention fellow at the National Cancer Institute. I specifically work in the Behavioral Research Program within the Division of Cancer Control and Population Sciences. I'm in the Tobacco Control Research Branch and the Office of the Associate Director. I'll tell you more about that later.
Okay, on the subject of a lot of acronyms with the federal government, I actually maintain a Excel spreadsheet that's several hundred rows long with acronyms and what they mean for the new hires to help them get oriented, because there's a lot. Okay, so I came to the University of Maryland in 2006 for the Sociology PhD program. After my first year in the program, I did a year-long internship with the Census Bureau. And during that experience, I really respected the professionalism of the Bureau, and I enjoyed getting paid more for that internship than I did with my stipend. But the day-to-day work was boring. I didn't like it. So I finished up my program and wrote my dissertation on the history of economic inequality in the United States, which is of no interest to anyone in the federal government. But and I started looking for an academic job. And during the search process, my advisor recommended that I look at the Census Bureau, and the sociology department has placed people with the Census Bureau, and there's many contacts there. And reached out to people. So following their advice, I found they pointed me to a vacancy on USA Jobs. I applied and was brought in for a day of interviews. I think I had 6 of them and a job talk. And after that process, was offered a position at the National Survey of Children's Health, which was a new survey at the Census Bureau on the survey operations team. So what that means, the point I need to often make to people is I work at the Census Bureau and I have nothing to do with the census. I know people who work on it, so I'll talk to them about it, and it sounds like a major headache. So I'm actually glad to stay away from that. Although I hear it's fascinating work, but I work on a much smaller survey, and we are the survey operations team. So what that means is that the survey is actually owned by another government agency, in this case, the Maternal and Child Health Bureau, MCHB. And then they contract with us to actually conduct the survey. And because we're the Census Bureau, we have a lot of resources that no one else in the world has access to. And so it is a household survey. So we take a list, the master address file, a list of every address in the United States. And we select from that a sample of about 200 to 300,000 addresses to contact and ask them a series of questions about the health of the children living in that household. And so my job is primarily to manage the data end of things. So when we select the sample, making sure that the sample was selected correctly, that it is a quality sample. Then when we start to contact, I track the responses, who's responding, how many people are responding, who's not responding, and trying to figure out why they're not responding. And that's where the sociology comes into play. Who are we reaching, who are we not reaching, and why, and how can we do a better job of getting a representative sample of children from across the United States? And then once those responses come in, to then clean up that data. People don't always follow instructions and don't always give answers that make sense. And so we need to go through and try to make the best sense of it and produce a data file that is accurate, representative, and intelligible. It's an annual survey. We go out we start mailing out to households normally in late June, early July. This year we were, because of COVID, delayed by a month and a half. So we're in the field right now, we're collecting data. And then about a year from now, we will publish the results of the survey that's going on right now. And so it's an annual survey that takes 3 years between planning, running the survey, and then collecting the data, cleaning the data, publishing the data. And so we are involved in every stage of the process at any point. And yeah, I think that's the main point. So I've been there for 6 years now in the same branch. And it's really been a privilege because it was a new survey. So we built the operations plan from the ground up. And so that was a great learning experience. And yeah, I'll turn it over to Ashley.
Hey, Scott, could I ask you just to say a little bit about kind of your thoughts about what you were going to be doing with this PhD, and also if you have advice right now for students who are maybe not sure what they're going to do or feeling nervous about job searching?
I would say the thing I learned for me personally is to stay open-minded. Like I said, I didn't enjoy my internship at Census. I appreciated the Bureau, but I did not enjoy the job I did. But when it came time to job, when I was looking for a job, I had one other offer at the time from a relatively small university in Idaho, which moving to Idaho would have been a big setback for my wife's professional goals. And it's also really cold in Idaho, so we didn't want to go there. So I was initially hesitant, but I took a look at what the job offered, and and decided to dive in, and it's worked out well. I would say another thing about working in the federal government is that the hardest part is getting in. And I have stayed in the same branch the whole time, and I've enjoyed what I've done and haven't tried to move. But once you are once you are a federal government employee, it's easier to then move around within an agency, between agencies. And so when there's an opportunity that's not awful, and it might not be the ideal opportunity for you, it might not be a bad option to get in, and then, not immediately, but that can open doors for you down the road, and other opportunities. And the government's huge and does everything. So there's lots of opportunities.
Super. Thank you, Scott. Ashley, go right ahead. Tell your story.
Sure. So I'm a materials scientist and engineer. If none of you are in engineering school, then you might not know what that is. So I guess it's like being an applied chemist, if you will, trying to make things better by tweaking atoms and trying to put them in a certain orientation so they can have properties that are useful. So I went to Maryland as an undergrad. I actually was originally in a BSMS program, and then kind of decided a little too late that, you know what, I think I want to get my PhD instead. I think that was maybe inspired by some of my undergraduate work. I had worked at the U.S. Army Research Lab for some time in Aberdeen Proving Grounds, and I noticed that everybody there was a PhD, and so I was like, man, maybe I should probably do that too. Turns out there are a lot of places that you can work where not everybody's a PhD, but certainly has been an asset for me in my career. So I ended up working for Dr. Waxman at the Energy Research Center. I worked on solid oxide fuel cells at the time. And then I was awarded the SMART Scholarship, which I think was a big contributing factor to, I guess, how my career would go. As if you're unfamiliar with this scholarship, it is it's specifically for the Department of Defense. The intent of the scholarship is to try to, I guess, capture and retain, I guess, smart people for the Department of Defense. It's SMART means science, mathematics, and research for transformation, but it sounds cool to be called a SMART scholar, I guess. But so with this scholarship, it actually gave me a job offer at what was called my sponsoring facility. So the way this worked is while I was in graduate school, during the summers, I had an internship with my sponsoring facility. And then once I completed my PhD, I then began working for my sponsoring facility. So if any of you are early in your studies, you can also apply to the SMART Scholarship. Actually, I think like literally this is the time of year you want to start applying. I think the deadline's usually in November or December. So if you're interested in the Department of Defense, I guess this is my plug. The reason why it was really beneficial in grad school is they pay you while you're in grad school, which is nice for you and for your advisor. And they basically get you for free for 9 months out of the year. And then for 3 months, you are working at your sponsoring facility. All right, so that's if you're early. If you're a little later in your PhD, I don't think you can apply to that scholarship. So when I finished my degree, I had spent 3 summers at my sponsored facility already. So I actually had incorporated some of that work into my dissertation. That was really cool because, you know, it made my entire year useful for my degree. But also when I got to my job now, it used to be called the Communication Electronics Research Development Engineering Center, or the CERDAC. They just changed their name because the Army just transitioned into a new command called Army Futures Command, or I guess they stood up a new command called Army Futures Command. And with that came a lot of organizational changes. And now my organization is called the C5 ISR Center. Hopefully I can remember all the C's: Command, Control, Computer, Communications, and Cyber. And then ISR stands for Intelligence, Surveillance, Reconnaissance. So all that means is we make widgets that do all of those features. So if the Army needs it for reconnaissance, if the Army needs it to gain intel, the Army needs it for sensing purposes, we are the center that develops that. So my role is in developing batteries for all of these devices. And so I'm a material scientist. So I wear a couple hats. I guess I do basic research a little bit at my facility. So it has afforded me opportunity to patent some materials and still publish. I'm actually going to be going to a conference. Well, it's virtual now, but I have a conference next week that I'll be attending. But I actually get to really lean into applied research and developing of actual tangible systems. And I interact with soldiers. And so one of our products, when we create a new battery, there's a lot more to it than just packing some cells together with some electronics. In the consumer world, we don't have to consider things like projectile interaction with a battery, right? But our soldiers do. And if they're wearing these things, we don't need them to turn into a fireball for their safety, obviously. So we have to make it extra ruggedized. They have to be able to, truck through mud and water, and all their stuff still has to work. Because if their radio doesn't work, they can't communicate back to the people that can help them. If their GPSs don't work, they can't navigate, right? So having assured power is incredibly important. And so I guess I'm slowly narrowing it down. My actual niche is soldier power, so portable power. So things, might be like the size of your phone, and things that are going to be worn on the soldier. So I'm not talking about like batteries for a car or something like that. I'm talking about small portable batteries. What else? So I'm involved now with a lot of organizations in the government. As you can imagine, the Army is not the only organization that cares about powering things. So I am involved with, I guess, larger federal organizations that have an interest in batteries. Obviously the DOE, Department of Energy. Recently there has been an effort to try to bring manufacturing of batteries back to the US. And try to become a dominating force with regard to manufacture of batteries, because largely a lot of batteries are manufactured overseas, especially from the Department of Defense perspective. That's not a good thing, right? We would like to have everything be manufactured here in the US. And also, from the Department of Energy standpoint, they want to have good grid power. We want to be able to have electric vehicles, right? These are all benefits, right? So we talk a lot with our friends at the DOE. Obviously, we talk with our other counterparts in the DoD, the Navy, the Air Force, special operations, NASA we work with, FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. They actually have a whole facility where they test batteries in airplanes to see, there's a reason why you got to be careful with how you're storing your battery in an airplane, right? Because you have to keep your laptop with you, because at least the flight attendants know how to put out a fire in the cabin. But if it happens, in cargo, that's a bad day, right? And so, I mean, they do all kinds of crazy tests. So we meet, actually we're meeting this Friday, twice a year to go over safety incidents and concerns across all federal organizations that have interest in batteries. So I love that I have that kind of, I guess, network, if you will. I know a lot of folks, a lot of organizations, and I guess that brings me to perhaps my advice, and that is, I think your reputation and your ability to help others and your network, I guess, is very, very, very important. I would say that I have been very lucky to get where I am, because I would have, maybe my mentors have helped me get here, and they maybe knew somebody that happened to get me somewhere. Actually, a professor at the university, she's the reason why I even had my very first internship at the Army in the first place, which might have helped me get my scholarship, right? And you can see how these things can carry downstream, right? So, you know, it's very important to maintain positive relationships with people, not to use them, right? I mean, it certainly has its benefits, but you know, it's always great to be like, oh, you know, I know somebody actually would know the answer to this question. From a research perspective, it's also really helpful, right? For example, if I'm looking for how a battery would be applied in cold temperatures for maybe our Arctic situations, I can call up my friends at NASA who obviously have experience with dealing with batteries at very cold temperatures, right? And so it's just, I think my biggest advice would be to, you know, protect your reputation and ensure that you know, you have a strong network. Maybe that's probably my advice to leave you with. Heather, I guess it's all to you.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks so much. All right, Heather, you're going to wrap up our comments, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A after you.
All right, that sounds great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Scott and Ashley, for your talks. It's really interesting to learn about you and your journeys. So I guess about me, I guess I did my undergraduate and my master's of science at the University of Florida, where I had a concentration in behavioral health. And following that, I actually worked in global health for a few years in Peru, and did a lot of global health work on the ground there. I was there for about 3 years, and I realized that I was ready to do my PhD. And I had applied for a few schools, and Maryland really stuck out for me personally. And one of the reasons why was because I had always worked for nonprofits, and I really wanted the opportunity to be close to government and being close to DC and everything. Maryland had a ton of other values that I really respected, and why I chose to go there. But I think that that was also one of the reasons why. And so once I graduated from Maryland, or while I was doing my PhD at Maryland, when I was thinking about what I wanted to do after I graduated, I was definitely still thinking about government. What did I want to do? I knew I wanted to do a postdoc position that would train me and further my research skills. And so I really was trying to think about, like, what are different postdoc positions that would give me the opportunity to expand my skills in the areas that I'm most interested in. And so my research, personally, my research focuses on the role of health literacy and health communication across the cancer care continuum. And so I examine cancer risk perceptions and health decision-making, such as affective factors and social processes like self-affirmation and how that influences decision-making that people make. And I also research things like misinformation, which is really prevalent, patient-provider communication, and informed and shared decision-making about lung cancer screening. And so when I was in school at Maryland, I ended up finding out about this program called the Cancer Prevention Fellowship Program. And it's a 4-year postdoctoral program at the National Cancer Institute that trains future leaders in the field of cancer prevention and control. And so it takes postdocs from a wide variety of backgrounds. So I'm in public health and behavioral and community health, that's my background. But it gives postdocs the opportunity to train in a wide variety of opportunities in cutting edge research. So basic, quantitative, social and behavioral health, clinical, cancer prevention. So if you're interested in cancer research at any level, doesn't matter what your background or field of study is, this definitely might be a postdoc program for you to check out. And so I applied for the program in the end of my 3rd year at the about to start my 4th year. And it was really early. A lot of the postdoc applications, especially like the academic postdoc applications, weren't due until spring of the year I was graduating, so spring of 2019. And so I think if it's a government application or a postdoc or even a job, the application cycles are really, really early. So advice here right away, start looking now if you're a little bit later in your program. These applications come out pretty early. So I know that the CPFP, the Cancer Prevention Fellowship Program application, launched in spring of my third year. And then it was due right before my fourth year started. And so I applied like right before fall of my fourth year, and then I got an interview. Oh, great. I knew he would bark just when it was my turn.
Heather, it's okay. It's a whole new world.
Oh, yeah. Of course it happens. It would be perfect if it didn't, but that doesn't happen. But I interviewed fall of my fourth year and then was accepted into the program. And so as a cancer prevention fellow, in my role, I have the opportunity to create and lead my own research projects with multidisciplinary teams of scientists across the National Cancer Institute. I also have the opportunity to apply for internal grant awards at NCI so that I can collect primary data to run my own research studies, in addition to doing secondary data analyses. So what Scott was talking about, doing like national data collection, which is amazing. I take those secondary data sets and then run studies based on that secondary data. But I can also then do my own smaller, much smaller studies with primary data collection and run studies. So I currently, for example, was recently awarded 2 grants to support a really large study that I'm working on with another cancer prevention fellow. And so really my day-to-day is all research. I work on several research teams. I lead my own studies. I work with other researchers and fellows and colleagues who are program directors at NCI. Yeah, so that's really my day-to-day is really revolves around research and then just training to make me a better researcher for future positions that I personally want to apply for. So some important skills for success in a position such as this postdoc or even an academic postdoc where you would be doing a lot of research, I would say is independence, organization, creativity, and of course, research skills. My fellowship is a bit different from other postdoctoral programs in that I have the opportunity to select my own mentor, as well as develop and lead my own research projects. And my research projects are based on my interests, not necessarily like the interests or work of my mentor. Although in my experience, I work really well with my mentor and we work together as colleagues and it's wonderful. And so I really have to have a lot of independence to run all of my own studies, to collaborate with other researchers and fellows at NCI to basically create these research projects. That also leads to organization. And so for me, I'm pretty type A. I don't see it necessarily as a bad thing, but I'm really organized and I feel like I do really well and I'm successful in my fellowship because of my organization skills. I'm running multiple studies at the same time. I'm leading multiple studies as well as participating in multiple group studies with other researchers. So I really need to organize my time diligently to accomplish all of my tasks. My position also really needs creativity as well as just thinking outside of the box when it comes to research, given that my program is really to train fellows to become the next leaders in the field of cancer prevention and control. So it really pushes us to do research that hasn't been done before and that isn't just the status quo. So it really helps me to think about my research and think about what am I truly doing that's going to be contributing to science? Is it really pushing us forward? And then finally, of course, just having general research skills, which all of you are getting in in your graduate programs. And I feel like I'm really benefiting in my postdoctoral program because there's so many training opportunities at NCI, at NIH in general. And I know my specific cancer prevention fellowship program has even more training opportunities for fellows to just continuously build my skill sets so that I'm more marketable for future positions. And so I know that for me, for future positions, I'm leaning towards academia. I taught at Maryland every semester I was there, and my last year I was a full adjunct professor. And so I really enjoy that. But I do also really enjoy government. And so I know Scott was kind of throwing everybody, like, if you get in, if you can just get in the door, you can up and change positions. I definitely agree with that. And I'm seeing the benefits of working for an organization like NCI, and I really enjoy my time there. So I see that being definitely potential down the road, maybe going to academia and then coming back to NCI. So we'll see what happens. But one way that I definitely see myself making that happen is through networking. And I definitely recommend everyone here to take advantage of networking opportunities. Ashley said this too. I take the opportunity to introduce myself to everyone that I meet at the National Cancer Institute or when I'm on campus at NIH. Even people at conferences, for example. I know it's a little bit tougher now that we're in the COVID world and everything is a bit more digital and online now, but still take the opportunity to network, partner with colleagues. I actually was able to start 2 new research projects with Cancer Research Training Award Fellows. That's different from CPFP, the Cancer Prevention Fellowship Program. You can become a CERTA Fellow, the Cancer Research Training Award Fellow, as a pre-doc at NCI, so that may be something that you want to look into. They also have postdocs fellowships as a CERTA, but I was able to partner with 2 CERTAs as well as 2 NCI directors and a professor from Dartmouth during the pandemic. And so just take every opportunity that you can to network and seize it. I know that that's going to benefit me and benefit everyone on this call when you're applying for jobs in the future. And so in terms of just additional advice that I wish I had known when I was a pre-doc doing my PhD, take advantages to work with professors who have data and push to publish with them, push to be on their papers. I wish I had more publications going into my postdoc program. I personally only had 2 or 3. And it can be hard to find those opportunities. I understand that. A lot of times those opportunities are only available for someone who gets an RA-ship with that professor. And so if that is the case, look into publicly available data sets. Scott talked about a data set that he pulls together. There are nationally available data sets that are public. So you can actually do an independent study with a professor that you trust and that can help you along the way. And then you can ideally publish whatever you put together. So that's definitely another way that you can get a publication and then get more experience working with secondary data or a national data set. So that's something I never done work with national data sets until now being at NCI. Also, the last thing I'll mention is that if you're see yourself going into research, you're going to have to know some kind of data analysis. And I know that we go through classes that do that, but in my department, I was only taught how to use SPSS. And now that I'm at NCI, R is really prevalent, SAS is really prevalent, just coding in general. So I've learned SAS during my postdoc. I'm learning R as well. It's a lot of coding, it's a lot of time, it's additional just hours. And then asking friends and colleagues, oh my God, I have an error in my code, I don't know where it is. Why didn't I take a class on this during my PhD? So if your department doesn't teach you how to code, definitely try to do a class now. Just trying to put in that extra effort now during your PhD so that you have those skills when you're applying for postdocs, and then during your postdoc, so that you just have that extra edge, or even if you're going straight to an academic job or a government job or into industry, I think that'll really, really benefit you in your careers. And so that's pretty much all the advice that I have. And thank you so much for letting me be here.
Thank you. I want to, first of all, before I open it up to questions, I want to thank all three of you, Scott, Ashley, and Heather. Every time we have done this Rita B. Leahy series, we always get the right combination of individuals and alumni whose stories complement each other. So we have about 20 minutes with you, and I really want to give our students and postdocs a chance to ask questions. So if any of you have a question, could you raise your hand and or unmute yourself and introduce yourself and to whom you're going to direct the question. You can direct your questions to one person on the panel, or you could direct it to all three of them. So is there anyone who is going to be brave and fearless and go ahead and ask the first question?
I have a question. Hi. I'm Megan. I'm a fourth year in Maryland's developmental psych PhD program. My question is for Heather. So I guess I just want to hear a little bit more about how your experience doing research has felt different at NCI compared to how it felt in an academic institution during your PhD.
Yeah, that's a great question, Megan. I think that it's much more independent, but also much more supportive, if that makes any sense. So when I first got to NCI, my specific program is very, very laid out with training opportunities. There's a leadership training. I start a very intense grant writing training actually next week on October 5th. There's all of these training programs put in place so that we are extremely successful during our program and when we leave the program. We also, in our first year, I'm currently at second year, in our first year, we have to put together like a research proposal after we select our mentors and go through like our summer curriculum training. And so that was something that right away we have to come up with a really big project and lay it all out, kind of like we just did for a dissertation in a way. But it was just something that we worked on individually, but then, you know, you work on it with your mentor, they give you advice, and then you turn that in. And then technically you just kind of get going and you pick projects, you jump on projects, and then you start running your own projects. At Maryland, I mean, I had the opportunity to do a dissertation. I got funding for my dissertation. I had $15,000 to run my dissertation. I did something that I really wanted to do, which I was really happy with. Still trying to publish all my articles for that. So behind. But I felt like if there was anything more that I wanted to do besides just that, I couldn't do it. I mean, unless it just felt, I just feel like I have so much opportunity and independence as a fellow at NCI to pursue the research interests that I am passionate about, that are relevant to today, that are research gaps, and I can kind of push the research agenda forward in the areas that I'm most passionate about. Whereas at Maryland, it was following a specific curriculum, which is what a PhD program it is. You know, you follow that, and then you finish your classes, and then you do your dissertation, and you finish. Whereas now it's very independent, and I can be running as many studies as I want, which is wonderful.
That's such a great question, Megan. I would love to have Scott and Ashley talk about that as well, because I know when I'm doing career work with our doc students, one of the things they are concerned about is, will they be able to use their research skills, and will the projects be challenging? So Ashley, if you could go ahead and address it, and then Scott, that would be great.
Sure. So I guess in my particular organization, there's actually not a ton of basic research that generally goes on, but because I am one of the few with a comma after my name, I guess, they kind of allow me to be, I guess in my organization, they just call me a subject matter expert, and that just gives me kind of free reign to propose independent research that I can get funded directly to me to work on, or frankly, my management finds value in my research kind of regardless of whether or not there's direct funding for it, because they know that it contributes to my ability to be a subject matter expert. And so my organization is supportive of me performing research. Also makes it look good because there's not a lot of research being done in my particular organization. So when we do publish and patent and such, a lot tends to come out of our lab, and it makes my organization look good. So we pretty much we completely, figure out what we want to do. Again, my management is supportive. They will purchase equipment that we think is necessary for characterization and what have you. And I've never had any problems doing any research that I wanted to do. And I think maybe that's one of the benefits of working for the company that prints the money, if you will, right? Like we, of course, Congress has to give us our budget, which is maybe a headache all of us are dealing with right now. But it's nice to have the support. I guess that's what Heather was saying, is you get more support to do research, and you can kind of just let your mind take the reins and go, instead of being kind of at school, like you kind of have to stick with the interests of your advisor. You eventually want to graduate, so you also want to make your advisor happy, and sometimes you want to go off on this direction, and well, you have to stay in this direction. So it's a lot easier for you to do what you want to do, I would say, I think, in my organization. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, thanks. So Census has a division of subject matter experts, which in classic federal government tradition, we call SMEs, because we have to turn that into an acronym too. I am not a SME, so I'm in operations, right? So my position is not defined by doing research in the traditional sense. Now, that said, I have very intentionally carved out a space for me to do that, right? And so I have carved out the space so that I can produce papers and go to conferences, but that's something that I had to work for because of where I am. I had to make that happen. But that said, people support me doing it at the same time, right? Because the Census Bureau and other agencies, they want to be represented in the academic world. They want to be seen doing cutting edge research. And so I've had to carve that out, but there's been the resources available.
It looks like Scott just froze up. So it sounds like he also gets support. Thanks, Scott. Let's go on to another question.
I have a question. I'm Christina. I'm a fifth-year PhD student in bioengineering. And I guess maybe like Ashley, we're a little more similar in backgrounds, but my question is for anyone that can answer. So one of my hesitations of doing a government lab or federal lab is that I might want to go back into academia, and I wasn't sure if that would be more difficult compared to just taking a traditional academic route. But I am interested in government as well. So I don't know if you can like comment on that.
I can. My mentor actually, so my organization moved from Fort Monmouth, New Jersey down to APG like 12 years ago. And my mentor was actually a professor at Rutgers while also being an employee at it was called the CERDEC then. And I have other members, another gentleman in my branch. He's a professor in a university in Virginia. And so he's not a full professor, right? Maybe an adjunct type professor, but they do support you teaching, right, at universities. I guess technically it wouldn't be out of the question for me if I wanted to teach, and if the university would have me, right? I probably could go ahead and teach at a university. Again, it is in my organization, I'm gonna try to move you guys out of the sun here. In my organization's opinion, if it helps me to be better for the Army and helps me, right, be more well-rounded and just generally have more knowledge, they're pretty supportive. So I know of those two instances, even within my own branch of 15 people, right, where they have had or are professorships and professors.
I would be happy to help answer the question too, if that's okay. Great. So at NCI, there's both the intramural research division and then the extramural research division. Extramural is basically the grant making division. So those of you that are thinking about going to academia, if you're going to apply for grants from NIH, you'd be applying for grants in the extramural division. Intramural is usually, the intramural division is where all of our basic scientists typically work. And so I'm not sure what specifically for basic science, what area you're in, but at NCI, we have the intramural side, and so we have a lot of basic scientists there. But NIH has 27 different institutes, and so, oh gosh, we have 27 different institutes, and so you can technically come and be a postdoc at NIH, for example, and then following a postdoc, then apply for an academic position. And so in my field in public health, it's really common to do a postdoc and then apply for academic positions. And so, and it's actually becoming really common or more common that if you don't have a strong postdoc position, you're not as well qualified for one of the better academic, like R1 institution assistant professorships. And so, you're more qualified for those assistant professorships if you have a postdoc. And so that might not be the same case for your field, but you may consider doing a postdoc at a place like NIH, where you can work in an intramural branch in an institute where you're able to practice your science, refine your techniques, etc. And then I know that for basic scientists, some of the postdocs can go up to 7 years. And then following that, there are opportunities within NIH, it's called FAES, to teach. And so, and if you don't want to teach at FAES, there's a lot of basic scientist courses to teach, or biology, or other types of courses. You can potentially teach at local community colleges. There's a ton of courses you could teach there, just to like bolster your teaching portfolio to make you more ready and eligible when you're ready to apply for academic positions after your postdoc. So those are just some options that I thought of.
Cool, thank you. Thanks, both of you.
Scott, were you gonna?
I could elaborate that actually a third person now teaches at West Point. So obviously work in the Department of Defense. We also have our own education system. And so it is very easy if you want to teach at Naval Academy, if you want to work for the Navy, or like I said, West Point for the Army. I forgot about her, and she's now the president of IEEE. So she worked in my branch, went to West Point, and then she accepted the president role, I guess, of the IEEE.
Scott, what about from your perspective of the census and even colleagues and cohort members from sociology? Have you seen people going back and forth and crossing that boundary?
You have to really want to. And because we're not trying to train people to go back to academia. But it's, I mean, it's not like discouraged, but you have to want to, you have to put that effort in and put that time in to make that happen.
So I want to add something. I found this really intriguing. As the three of you gave your answers, you really pointed out all of these different roles, faculty roles in higher education. And so often our doc students are thinking only of R1 universities, right? And so there are all these other ways to keep that passion for academia in play. The other thing I want to toss out there is, depending on your discipline, right now, the industry of higher ed has been impacted by COVID in ways that we don't even know what's going to happen, right? We're just seeing this third pandemic, right? The financial impact of everything. And so as I've been talking with my colleagues, it's really clear that higher ed is going to be transformed. And not only are there all these other teaching roles, we don't know what it's going to look like on the other side of all of this. So there probably are going to be really incredible PhDs graduating now that perhaps don't find a faculty position right now, and they go off and they do fellowships like Heather has described. They do applied work in the Census Bureau. They're doing research in industry or for other federal labs. And we don't know how it's all going to shake out. So my prediction is that crossing that barrier will look different 5 years down the road, because higher ed is going to look different. The other thing that I found was so interesting is, Scott, you're really in a very applied role. You made it clear that in your operations role, you're expected to do different things than Heather and Ashley, who are in primarily research-focused roles. So as you all are thinking about your own futures, I think there are things we don't know about what's going to happen with higher ed yet, which is why we're all talking about, you know, for the time being, having a plan A and a plan B and sowing lots of different seeds and then evaluating which opportunities present themselves. Because as Scott said, flexibility is key. All right, I think we're going to have time for one more substantive question. I want to be really respectful of our panelists because technically it's still their work day. So let's see if someone has a question.
It looks like Elizabeth raised her hand.
Hi.
Thank you. Thank you for seeing that. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Hi. I recently received my PhD in theater and performance studies. So I'm coming from a vastly different background, although I do have a master's in sociology. I just wanted to know, during my studies, working for a federal agency and arts institution was not on my radar. Do you have any advice for someone who maybe doesn't have previous contacts or hasn't done an internship? How difficult is the application process for someone, you know, coming in at maybe later in the game? Yeah, I'll leave it there just for time.
Okay, let me say a little bit, and then I'll let those of you who know about any of the typical pathways programs, if you could add that on. So in terms of the federal government, COVID has created this set of COVID-specific jobs. My advice for someone who's kind of coming into it late in the game, to think about what are called new graduate programs. I'm going to use that language, and pathways programs. And then I would say that you definitely want to work with probably me to come up with a strategy to start identifying where you can fit in. So that's where I'm going to end, and I'm going to see if our panelists want to add anything.
I can go ahead. So my experience is a little different in terms of what I personally have applied for, because mine was a fellowship. It was through a fellowship application, so not USA jobs. But what I have had in my program is basically people who work around USA Jobs come out and specifically train my fellowship programs and our postdocs on how to apply through USA Jobs, because technically I am not a government employee. I'm also not a contractor. And so I do not have like the, I guess, the privilege that Scott has being in the government to apply for new jobs within the government and be able to switch. I will have to apply as just a normal citizen like anyone else once I am out of my fellowship. And so some key things that they shared, the job is posted and it's up for like 5 days. It's a really short time. And so having your resume already built, everything kind of already fixed in is really, really important. The other thing is that, you basically have to be kind of ready to go right when it's posted and kind of have that week planned out to spend time on it. But the number one things they look for is for you to steal the words from the posting and place those words into your resume, into your cover letter, rewriting things from previous jobs, even if those previous jobs weren't government oriented, are theater based. I was in the School of Music and the soprano. I sang during my entire PhD program. I love theater, so very, very cool. Tailor those things, represent them in a way that shows your strengths that are related to the positions that you'll be applying for. And so it's still really, really tricky to get into the door, but those were some of the best kind of key highlights that they shared with us.
It's its own job search process. Scott and Ashley, do you have some thoughts about that?
Yeah, I guess I kind of really mirroring what she had to say. All I could think to do would be to look at usajobs.com, usajobs.gov, and as she said, be ready, because these positions are usually up for a very short amount of time. But also, don't be concerned if you get brokenhearted a bunch too, because sometimes those positions are actually already meant for somebody, but they have to legally post it. So you're aware that that's what's really happening. So like, for example, when my team lead was promoted to a branch chief, they had to post it onto USA Jobs, and then people had to apply before he was allowed to be promoted to branch chief. So just be aware that sometimes that is the case. But other than that, frankly, I consider myself lucky that I was able to get into the government, because the SMART scholarship is one of the only ways that I can think of that at the end, a job awaited me, and I became a civilian as soon as I graduated, it is, as you have identified, quite challenging to do. And as Scott had mentioned before, it is one of the biggest hurdles, but once you get in the door, now I'm a civilian, and I know people that have transitioned from my organization to all over the place, right? And it's quite simple to do once you already work for the government.
So just really,
that's not that helpful.
When you apply on USA Job, at least for, I think this applies to, I don't know, defense might be different, but you apply, and then it has to be reviewed by HR and has to make cert, is how we call it. And the hiring manager doesn't see it till you make cert. So when you're looking at questions, interpret them as liberally as possible in your favor. Don't lie, but as liberally possible so that you make cert. And then let the hiring manager make decisions, right? So HR isn't making the choice for them, if that makes sense.
Okay, and just to reiterate, I heard Heather say contractors. So there's some agencies that they bring folks in as contractors, right? That's the start of the process. There are the new graduate programs, and most people think they're only for undergrads who are new grads, but they're also for graduate students and PhDs who are new graduates. And as was said, you need to be ready to go, and you need to master that whole USA Jobs process. And I put in the chat box, there's a YouTube channel by a woman named Catherine Troutman. She is the expert on the federal hiring process, and she has lots of great short videos that help. But I would encourage you, if you are interested, Elizabeth, in a federal job, that you start mastering that process. And the career, I can help you with that. And there's a lot of resources out there. Many of our career centers bring in OPM HR folks who demystify this process. And I always like to explain to PhDs, it's an exercise in following instructions. That's what it's all about. Okay, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I'm going to thank our panelists from the bottom of my heart. I am going to quickly share a screen that has an evaluation URL, and I really invite you, participants, to fill that out. But could you all in the audience unmute yourselves and give our panelists a round of applause and say thank you? I'm going to unmute you all right now. Let's pretend we're in person here. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I am so appreciative of all of you. Let me quickly share my screen to show all of you the URL for the evaluation. It will take you literally 2 minutes. It's go.umd.edu Leahy eval. Okay. And I will hang around for a few minutes. I know, panelists, that you have much to do. I can't thank you enough. If you can stay, you're more than welcome to. If you need to run, I understand. But thank you so, so much. On behalf of the Graduate School and the Career Center, we could not do this without you, and I am so grateful.
It's been a real pleasure, truly. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very, very much. And
yeah,
I am going
nice meeting everyone. Thank you.
Have a great one, and be safe and be well.
Have a great week.
You too. Bye-bye.